This week on Christian World News, we take you to one of the most unreached places on earth. It's known as the land of the blue sky, and it is where a camp is changing lives one young person at a time. The epic story of a family's escape from Vietnam after the fall of Saigon, how a series of miracles saved their lives, and showing off the beauty of the Bible in America's capital. Hello everyone, welcome to this week's edition of Christian World News. I'm George Thomas. Wendy Griffith is on assignment. Our first story comes from a corner of the world where few have even heard the name Jesus. A team of Russian Christians traveled to the remote areas of Mongolia with the gospel. I had the incredible pleasure of joining them on their journey. Mongolia is known as the land of the blue sky. That's because people here enjoy more than 250 sunny days a year. Landlocked between China and Russia, it's one of the world's least densely populated countries. With just over 3 million people, more than half live in the bustling capital city of Ulaanbaatar. The rest of Mongolia, which is roughly 3 times the size of France, looks like this. Vast, treeless grasslands where most people live a nomadic lifestyle, raising sheep, goats, cattle, camels, and horses. And as I discovered, there are hardly any paved roads. First time driving here in Mongolia. I grew up in Africa. I loved driving a stick shift, so I'm very, very comfortable on these kinds of roads. So this is fantastic, and there's no traffic. I recently joined 46 Christians from neighboring Russia, heading to remote Western Mongolia, where few have heard the message of Christ's love. Pavel Barsokov led the mission.
The heart of my Lord Jesus Christ is for the lost and hurting. I want to have the same heart.
For 9 years, Barsokov has made dozens of trips to Mongolia, bringing along young Russian Christians trained and equipped to serve as possible missionaries and evangelists. 17-year-old Elena told CBN News she got the call to missions at a young age. This is her 3rd visit to Mongolia.
I read a book about a missionary in a foreign country, and since then, I have had this burning desire to share God's love with people.
This is Natasha Gorodnuk's first trip. She wants to serve in Nepal.
Every time I think about it, my heart breaks because I know the calling on my life and I know what I'm supposed to do.
For several weeks, Natasha, Elena, and 4 dozen other Russians partnered with Mongolian Christians to hold evangelistic camps for young people.
We started working together with our Russian brothers and sisters several years ago to reach my people with God's love. What we are doing is vital for changing hearts and minds.
In between playing games and enjoying other outdoor activities, camp organizers like Natasha Grishenko introduce Mongolians to Christianity. This is her 10th visit.
These kids are the future of Mongolia. They are future pastors, future church planters, and possibly future leaders of this country. God willing, they will carry the gospel in their hearts and impact their nation for Christ.
To better appreciate the significance of these camps, you have to understand the history of Christianity here in Mongolia. Shortly after the fall of communism, there were only 10 believers in the entire country. Today, some 26 years later, some 60,000 believers are spread across this vast nation.
We are in a remote western part of Mongolia, and it is still one of the most unreached places in the world.
Michael Cherenkov with Mission Eurasia co-sponsors the camps. His group focuses on raising the next generation of Christian leaders in countries of the former Soviet Union and surrounding nations.
Sometimes we think that people around the world know about Jesus, but there are places like this that haven't been touched by the gospel.
And so, camps like this one serve as an ideal ground for sharing the gospel. Whoa! With young people.
Lives like that of 22-year-old Buyana Davasumbu. She accepted Christ while attending camp here as a little girl. She graduated from Bible College in May and is now preparing to go on the mission field.
This camp was foundational to knowing God's love and preparing my heart to be a missionary. I try to come back every year to share my experiences of how I encountered Christ.
For others like 16-year-old Mashbat Bassan, a Buddhist, this was the first time learning about Christianity.
I learned in the Bible study today that God created the heavens and the earth, the animals and creatures of the sea. I never knew of these stories before.
This is also Kiliam Makmardor's first camp experience.
Many Mongolians don't believe in Jesus, and before I came to the camp, I also thought I didn't need to know anything about him. But now my heart has changed, and I've learned so much more about Christianity.
In all, some 1,000 young Mongolians heard the gospel, many of them for the first time.
I know there's all this controversy about Trump and alleged Russian collusion, but I encourage Christians in both of our countries not to focus on this. Millions of people around the world are going to hell because they don't know Jesus Christ. I'm not interested in politics. I'm interested about telling people about Jesus. Lives are in the balance, and we are commanded to go and tell others about Christ's love. This is what we are doing here in Mongolia.
The power of the gospel reaching the uttermost parts of the world. Up next, from a dream in a Saigon market to miracles at sea, one family's remarkable journey to freedom and faith.
Roman soldiers destroy the Second Temple of Jerusalem. Centuries of eyewitnesses say the temple treasures survived. But where are they?
They went from Jerusalem to Rome, Rome to Carthage, Carthage to Byzantium.
Historians are silent about what happened to it next.
This is a bad omen.
Hosted and narrated by Gordon Robertson.
So does it still exist today?
CBN Documentaries presents a story of mystery.
Where is it?
Calamity.
Most of the victims were butchered.
And destiny.
The possibility to dig is impossible.
Take a journey to find Treasures of the Second Temple, a CBN Documentaries presentation, coming July 8th.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Welcome back to Christian World News. 44 years ago, North Vietnamese forces overran their neighbors to the south. Many people chose to flee the communist takeover. Among them, Vinh Chung and his family. He relives their amazing journey, fraught with danger and filled with miracles.
April 1975. American military helicopters airlift embassy personnel and evacuees from Saigon. For many, this is the final image of the Vietnam War. For those left behind, it's only the beginning. At first, the new communist government told them that little would change in their daily routines. If only that had been true.
They first said that they just want peace, and they gradually started taking an inventory of all of our possessions, and then they could just continue to escalate to the point where my family literally lost everything and we were kicked out of our own homes.
At the time, Vin Chung's family owned a rice milling business, one of the largest companies in the Mekong Delta, and the Viet Cong wanted their share. Within months, the government confiscated everything, and just like that, the Chung's empire was wiped out. With no job or house to go home to, the family gathered what little they had left and fled. Vin was just 3.5 at the time.
And then overnight, we lost everything. And so my parents saw that if they were to stay behind, regardless of how hard we worked, that at any moment, the communists could take it away. And it was at that point, knowing that leaving the country could potentially result in death, my parents realized at that point it was worth the risk, because to stay behind, we had no future.
After the fall of Saigon, many of their fellow countrymen felt the same way. Thousands, if not millions, left when they could. So many of them went north to China that the Chinese closed its borders. Others who fled on land had to go west through the killing fields of Cambodia and Laos. The Chung family had one option: leave by sea, even though none of them had ever been on a boat or even seen the ocean.
We were allowed to take a small amount of money with us per person, but that was it. And so we decided to sell everything we had, get on this boat, go out to sea, and just hope for the best.
But shortly before they left, Vin's mother had a strange dream.
And in the dream, she was in the marketplace as usual. But all of a sudden, she looked around and everyone was lying dead. And in the middle of the market, she also saw this bearded man. And whoever he would point to, they would come back up alive again. And so while lying there in her dream, she kept praying and wishing and hoping that this man would come and point at her and her family. And in her dream, this man did, and we all became alive again. And after the dream, she kept wondering what it was. And there was something about the dream that made her feel that it was more than just a dream.
Of the so-called Vietnamese boat people, only 1 out of every 2 survived. They left with barely any food or supplies, and those refugee boats were easy prey for Thai pirates.
And on these boats, little rickety boats, we had women, we had children, we had elderly people, and we were unarmed. So we were essentially a floating bank vault for these pirates, and they knew that.
And then, second day at sea, an ominous ship appeared over the horizon.
They just came in waving knives, little screwdrivers, and just anything. And they would just go around ripping earrings off of people, ripping jewelry off, demanding anything of value. After they robbed us, they left as quickly as they came, and they were off.
Now, refugees are people without countries, and the places where they seek asylum oftentimes get tired of them tying up their social services. So when the Chung family arrived on the shores after 3 long days at sea, they weren't exactly greeted by a welcoming committee.
The local villagers there had called the Malaysian military to report another boat of people showing up on their shores. They weren't sure what to do with us.
Less than an hour after arriving in Malaysia, armed soldiers took turns beating some of the men before ordering the entire group to march. And they did, for days and days under the hot sun.
They didn't tell us what would happen. They didn't tell us where we would go. We were basically in no man's land. There was no country that claimed us. We were in a complete state of limbo. The conditions were so brutal that my mother actually suffered a miscarriage. After a few days on the beach, she started bleeding to the point where she had passed out and almost died.
After 2 weeks, the Malaysian guards put the Chung family back on a boat and towed them out to sea. They said they were going to an island refugee camp. But a day later, with no land in sight, the Malaysians cut the ropes and told the refugees they were on their own.
We were betrayed and we were lied to, and then we were essentially left for dead. They did not want to accept us into the refugee camp. They also did not want to shoot us, but instead they did in the most passive way, putting us in a circumstance that would rid us from their shores, because in that circumstance, death is really the only reasonable outcome.
When we come back, adrift at sea with no hope of rescue, the father prays for a miracle. You do not want to miss what happened next.
It's about the competition.
I kind of put that pressure on myself, and I think people had expectations.
It's about overcoming.
We use this phrase all the time, keep chopping, keep practicing hard.
It's about going the distance.
You know, I think as a father, it's my job, you know, to lead, just be the best husband and father I can be.
Watch Going the Distance with Sean Brown Saturday night at 7:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Woohoo! Hi, Superbook fans. Here's something else you'll love. It's the new Superbook Bible app. It's packed with games, activities, and Superbook episodes that you can watch for free. Oh, no! There's trivia, a fun daily devotional, and answers to your Bible questions. Plus, an easy-to-understand Bible the whole family will enjoy. You can even create your own Superbook character. Ta-da! Whoa!
Millsburg Falls man, come...
Sorry, pardon me. Sorry, excuse me. Ouch!
Are you getting this?
Earn super points to win daily prizes, too. And so much more! Time to get back to my adventures. See you soon. It's the new Superbook Bible app. Free downloads on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon.
How can you find God's plan for your life?
CBN presents The Plan, 8 Keys to Understanding God's Will for Your Life. In Pat Robertson's latest teaching, you'll discover the steps to take in following God's plan, how to know for certain when God is leading you, how to get rid of spiritual blindness and see God work.
God said, I've got a plan to give you a future and a hope.
Get The Plan. Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit cbn.com.
In 1975, Vinh Chung and his family had made it out of Vietnam, escaping the communist onslaught on a boat. But denied asylum in Malaysia, they now faced death on the high seas with no food or water to sustain them.
Dehydration begins when a body loses just 1 or 2% of its water reserves. Stranded in the South China Sea in the middle of July, Vinh and his family reached that stage after only a day. After 5 days at sea, the refugees were about to die.
We had no food, we had no water. There were people who had gone blind because their corneas were scorched. There were people who were hallucinating. My grandfather started hallucinating. And the women on board actually contemplated drowning their own children, because perhaps that would be the way that would minimize the suffering that they would have to undergo. And my father looked around and saw his children and his whole family dying. And so he got on his knees and prayed to the Creator God. And almost immediately, the clouds came in and water came out of the sky.
The rain helped them survive, but it wasn't going to help them live. The refugees needed another miracle. And thankfully, theirs was just a few miles away.
We see a large white ship. We didn't know if this ship would be another pirate ship, but by now we were so desperate that it didn't matter. And I remember the adults were telling everyone to lie down, so that we could look sick and get some more sympathy from the crew on this ship. It's kind of funny now to think about trying to act sick or desperate, because we were near death.
2 years earlier, the president of World Vision, a man named Stan Mooneyham, bought an old cargo ship and began trawling the miles and miles of empty waters for refugees. He called it Operation Sea Sweep. On July 9, 1979, Sea Sweep spotted Vin and his half-dead family bobbing up and down hundreds of miles from shore.
They're packed in there like sardines. Just literally chock-a-block. Oh, man.
The refugees were brought on board and given food, blankets, and Bibles. Vin's father was invited to attend a service held by the crew.
It was at that moment that he understood that this is the God that brought rain down to quench our thirst when we needed it.
At the time, President Jimmy Carter declared that any refugees picked up by a U.S.-owned ship would be guaranteed asylum in the United States. So within months after being rescued, Vin and his family arrived at their new home in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Soon, they found a place where they could fit in, a church that offered a Vietnamese language service. The Chungs decided to attend and couldn't believe what they saw.
In the church, my mother saw a framed picture of Jesus. And when she looked at that picture, she thought, that was a man in my dream. His name was Jesus. And he is a man who brings someone back to life. That someone could die and have a new life through him.
The Chung family made the most of America. His father worked long hours to support his family of 10. Vin studied hard and graduated high school valedictorian. From there, he went to Harvard to become a doctor. And a few years ago, he went back to Vietnam. There, he met some cousins and relatives, his family that didn't make it out.
I visited thatch roof huts with no electricity, no running water. I think at that point was when I realized that even though I had worked long and hard to get to where I was, it was really through no merit of my own. What really struck me at that point was Luke 12, verse 48, to whom much is given, much is expected. I'd never thought that that verse applied to me. I'd always thought that Jesus was talking about the rich or maybe the powerful people who could have an influence and have something to give. But when I was in Vietnam, I was able to see that everything that we have, regardless of how much or how little, has been given to us, and that we are stewards of all of our resources, all of our opportunities, and our potential influence for the kingdom of God. Now that I have been rescued, now that I'm safely on shore, my obligation is to send the boat back to those people who are in need.
Today, Vin Chung is doing just that. He lives in Colorado Springs with his wife and children. He owns and operates his own practice as a dermatologist. He also serves on the board at World Vision, the same organization that saved his life more than 30 years ago. And after a journey that took him 10,000 miles across 2 continents, he's finally home.
And as always, you can see more of these great stories at our CWN webpage. We'll be back right after this.
As the world watches from the outside,
it's a big diplomatic tug-of-war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline, Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Orphans
Orphans Promise is committed to loving and serving at-risk children, to helping keep families together, and to creating opportunities for strong and sustainable communities around the world. We're working in over 60 countries around the world, and with your help, we can do even more. There's an old African proverb I love that says, if you want to run fast, run alone. But if you want to run far, run together. At Orphans Promise, we want to run far so we can touch the lives of as many orphaned and vulnerable children as possible. But we don't want to go alone. We're out to change the world, one child, one family, one community at a time. Will you join us?
Meet the pastors who are preaching the gospel in a fresh, fearless way. I'm Roberto Torres-Cedillo. Join me each week for Next Gen Voices. And watch God transform a generation.
And welcome back to the broadcast. There was no separation of church and state in Washington, D.C. recently. The entire Bible was on display. But it wasn't just words on pages. As Paul Strand reports, it was a unique vision of a German painter spread across more than 3,000 pieces of art.
Imagine every single part of the Bible illustrated by a professional painter, and then all those paintings lined up next to each other and going all the way around the reflecting pool on the National Mall.
They say a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, so then what are 3,333 pictures worth? In this case, the entire Bible.
German painter Willy Wiedmann put many years of his life into this project. The head of the Museum of the Bible was excited to see it all displayed at once.
It's the world's longest Bible, arguably the world's longest illustrated book. And this is a chance for us to show it off to the district and to the nation.
The painter's son came all the way from Germany for the mile-long display and to represent his father's vision.
There are more than 1 billion people illiterate, people who can't read and write, and that's one way for them to engage with the Bible through visuals.
He believed that about 1/3 of the world's population either couldn't read or couldn't learn through words. They had to learn pictorially. And that was his motivation to spend 16 years of his life to create this amazing Bible.
The world might never have seen this treasure. The painter didn't even tell his own family about it.
It was a total surprise when I discovered it.
It was Martin and his family who discovered all the work their father had done.
Well, he put it away in 4 big aluminum cases, which I found after he died in his attic.
Wiedmann borrowed from many schools of art: surrealism, cubism, abstract expressionism. It led to a whole different look for biblical subjects.
He never wanted God to have a face or a gender, and so God is always represented as a triangle coming from the top of the page.
We're used to thinking of Jesus looking a certain way from all those Renaissance paintings. Wiedmann definitely had a style of his own. Like here's Jesus washing his disciples' feet and at the Last Supper.
Jesus is always represented with this crazy blonde hair. Don't know why.
But no matter how people felt about the style, it was one massive biblical wonder to behold.
To have a mile-long picture around the reflecting pool in form of a Bible, I mean, this is unheard of.
Paul Strand, CBN News, the National Mall.
Well, folks, thank you so much for joining us this week. Until next week, goodbye and God bless you.